Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Thank you so much for coming. I know he's been busy with GrowthHackers, so when you're busy, you don't have time to come out and share. But I think he's ready to share now.
Lesson 1: focus on your startup.
Yes, focus, execute, which you've done. So let's just get started. Usually what we like to start with is kind of your background, give everybody a little rundown about you, and then we'll kind of start with some questions.
Sure. So hopefully this microphone won't cut in and out. It sounds so good so far. I grew up in Orange County, grew up in Newport, and went to school in Northern California and basically was gone for 20 years and moved back about 5 years ago. But went to school at UC Davis, and then right after college moved to Eastern Europe, to Budapest, Hungary. And in Budapest, helped to start a couple of companies. First one was a company called Uproar.com, which was kind of the Zynga of its day. Casual games became the biggest game site in the world. And then after that, we sold that company to Vivendi Universal. And after that, we started Log Me In over there. And so basically about 5 years with each of those companies running marketing, and I realized after the second one that I was really lucky to have an opportunity to try to grow companies that each had that much potential, and so part of me said the next one's going to fail just statistically, so make sure there's not a next one. It kind of sounds like I'm joking there, but it's actually true. So what I did was I went and the other thing I realized was that the part that really mattered in startups was the upfront part. So making sure you have the right product for the right customers, getting the value proposition right, getting the onboarding and introducing the product to new people, and all of these things that essentially getting the tracking systems in place, the experimentation process, and all of those things could be done in really the first 6 months of the company. And once you did them, you only needed to do them once. And so that was the most important stage in a company, and in 10 years I'd only done it twice. And so what my goal was coming out off of the second company was to get a lot of practice in that upfront part. And so that's what I did for the next 4 years, was just go into companies. And first one I did only one in an interim VP marketing role for 6 months, and then I did two at the same time, because a lot of the programs I'm trying to put into place, there's time to implement, and kind of the tech team couldn't keep up. And then I did 4 at a time. So I started 2 each quarter, and so I got a really kind of systematic process of what we were trying to figure out, and how we could take that kind of a market-ready product with some early customer validation and really prepare them for growth. And so over that 3.5-year period, I ended up doing about 20 companies, and so a lot of the companies you listed were companies that I worked on during that time. And a lot of it was with the hopes that I could learn that really important stage and start my own company at some point, and that's what I did 5 years ago.
So what influenced you? Was there any particular thing that influenced you to become an entrepreneur? Because you were working for all of these companies, and then you kind of stepped out on your own. Was there some trigger that?
Yeah, so I always kind of wanted to be an entrepreneur. I did entrepreneurial stuff all through school. Got in trouble for selling candy in grade school, and my kids always joke because they're like, "You worked everywhere," when I list all the different places around that I worked at, and so I was always, and we had a Christmas tree delivery business when I was in high school. We were always coming up with different schemes. And then once I got out of college, I listened to the voice of reason, which was my dad, and told me no, you got to get experience before you start a company. And he's an entrepreneur, so he kind of said this is the way it works. And so I was a little afraid to start a company initially, but he also told me, "You're crazy to move to Eastern Europe," and so I listened to half of his advice and ignored the other half. And then, so I wanted to do it, and then I guess the other thing that held me back for a long time was that first group that I joined in Budapest, where we launched the game company Uproar.com. we had so much success kind of as a group that I wanted, and I was the growth guy in the group, and we all kind of had our role, and so when the same group of people who started logging me in, and so for 10 years that kind of kept me busy where I knew what I was good at in the group, and seemed to be a pretty successful formula, so I just didn't want to mess it up too much.
So GrowthHackers is the world's largest network of growth experts. Can you tell us more about GrowthHackers?
Yeah, so GrowthHackers kind of started as an accidental project. I think I mentioned I've been working on a company for almost 6 years now, and so it's, GrowthHackers is kind of the third run of this company. So the first one was something that completely didn't work out, but I got lucky that I had the track record of companies that I'd worked with, and I had a lot of investor relationships. So while it's been really hard for a lot of people to raise money, I didn't have an engineer on my team. I had a PowerPoint deck of an idea and was able to raise $5.5 million, and that's like a good thing, but at the same time, it's like, then you have to figure out how not to waste their money. And so I had an idea, which was a marketplace. I don't want to go into like all of the details about it because it's a whole separate story, but a marketplace for app discovery, for free app discovery, that would kind of market the category as a whole. And I realized after about a year and a half that a couple of key assumptions behind the business turned out to be false, and so we decided to shut it down. So I still had millions of dollars left because I was pretty careful with the money that we raised, and I had to try to decide what we were going to do next. And one of the things that we had done with this business was collected survey information about each of the products that we put into this marketplace. So we surveyed the active users on the product, kind of figured out what the best use cases were, had this comparison engine, and people really valued the insights that we helped uncover as much as the traffic that we were trying to send to them. So we started to go down a path of actually having more of a survey business, and we got a lot of feedback that the surveys that people liked were, if they're going to run a survey on their website, it needed to be super user friendly and something that wasn't going to screw up their website. Like needed to really fit in nicely, and everything they described that they needed turned out to be what this product, KISS Insights, was, a product that was part of KISS Metrics. And what I knew is that the team at KISS Metrics had tried to sell it to me earlier, and so I knew that they were looking for a home. They didn't feel like it was core to their business. I'd been an advisor there and got them into the business, so I said you guys should really do surveys in addition to the data side of things. So they created this product. It had kind of gotten started. Didn't have a whole lot of revenue behind it, but had some. But it was a good product, and so we acquired that, built it up to a pretty profitable business, and we did it over 2.5 years. A lot of hard work, and but what we realized after 2.5 years was that just getting profitable feels like, oh, you made it. Your head's above water, self-sufficiency. As the kind of economy gets a little shaky like now, it's nice to know you don't have to rely on external investors. But ultimately, we weren't building the business to just get our head above water. We wanted to build something big and great, and we'd raised enough money that we had to build something big and great when you take that venture capital in. And so along the way, we started as kind of what we realized is when Qualaroo, we changed the name to Qualaroo for KISS Insights, and when we ran Qualaroo on a marketing-related website, it actually generated a ton of signups. So there's a little powered by on there, and so we looked around, and there wasn't any huge marketing websites. They were all like a couple 100,000 people a month at the biggest, and so we thought we should start our own marketing website then, just as a place to demo the survey, and so that kind of started for a little while, but then we realized that there was a bigger opportunity around the marketing website that was growthhackers.com, and then that's initially started as a kind of Reddit for growth-related articles and community built around growth, and but for the last year and a half, we've been basically in the process of spinning out our survey business and then shifting our focus to building what we think is a really big business around GrowthHackers. And I can go into the details if you want me to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things, like you said, there's a lot of really great information. I follow them on Twitter, so I always like seeing all these great stories, articles that they write about, how to growth hack. So, I mean, it's for anyone, right? Any business could also go to the website and get information. It's not just particularly for a certain type of person.
Yeah, anybody can benefit from it, but basically where we're moving toward with it is that what you'll see in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to bring together a bunch of disparate parts that we've been working on for a couple of years that have been running independently. So we have in private beta a growth experimentation platform called GrowthHackers Projects that has 7,000 companies that have signed up for it, really active usage in it. It's invite only, so a lot of those companies haven't been invited in yet. And then the community itself, one of the big benefits that people get is ideas,
right.
is things to try. And so what the next step of what we're going to be releasing over the next few weeks is essentially we've built out a big supply chain of testable ideas that are relevant across multiple companies. And so when you see ideas that you like scattered throughout our community and our other channels, you'll be able to clone those ideas, send them into a project, and then collect them and essentially manage them through a workflow to see if they work for your business or they don't work for your business. And so that's when the pieces will come together. But we've known what we were building now for quite a while, but it's probably been a little confusing to anyone on the outside, but it doesn't matter.
It'll definitely help us
as long as we know.
So you coined the phrase growth hacking, which Ad Age recently called the next big thing in marketing. In your opinion, what is the next big thing in marketing?
So I agree with Ad Age.
Is there any tool or trick or, every business is different, but is there anything that you could share with us that you feel
I think the key is that it's not about a tool, it's not about a single growth hack or some trick that you can use to grow your business. It's about committing to a process. It's sort of like, what's the one thing in the gym that you can do to get in shape? Commit to the process of going to the gym, eating right, balancing across multiple exercises, and it's sort of the same thing, that you ultimately need to balance your experimentation across your full funnel. So you need to experiment with retention, with customer referral, with onboarding new customers, activating new customers, external customer acquisition, and that ultimately your growth is a function of the number of experiments that you run and the quality of those experiments. And if you can find a way to run lots of experiments, even if the quality's not great, you're going to probably figure out some great ways to grow the business. And so that's, to me, the next big thing is just the understanding of what does it actually take to grow. It takes rapid experimentation and being super systematic about it in a really early stage company. It's a single person who's managing a lot of that. As you get bigger, it's a more specialized group of people, and the poster child companies for growth have been Uber, Facebook, Twitter, not so recently, but in the past, LinkedIn, and these companies all used this process of rapid experimentation where they were able to mobilize kind of big groups across the company to manage that.
So just even a small company, a startup, could kind of take some of the things off your website and implement it?
Sure. In a small company, usually the initial growth team is the whole company. That if you don't have customers, what are you doing? So you need to be obsessed on getting those first few customers. Usually the CEOs playing a big role. Sometimes engineers say, well, it's not really important for me, but it is. And so it's really, in early stage companies, you want to have kind of the first 3 or 4 people obsessed on getting customers and exposing them to the product. If you can bring in a growth hacker or somebody who's ultimately managing the process, spending all their time thinking about experimentation and managing experimentation, that's great, but it's not required. So my goal when I worked with Dropbox and when I worked with some of these other companies was to bring that culture of experimentation and data to those companies, but not to be reliant on me. When I left, they didn't bring in another growth-focused person for 9 months after I left, and they didn't miss a beat. But it was basically the whole company had bought into data, experiment, figure out what's working, do more of it, double down, and definitely the fastest growing company I've ever worked with.
All startups have their various ups and downs. Can you share an experience with us that you feel that would help entrepreneurs today, like having some ups and downs yourselves, or were you everything with that?
I kind of told you a story of my ups and downs. I mean, there's a lot of tenacity over the last 5 years. Like it was really tempting to quit and give the money back to my investors when the first idea didn't work out. And that would have been such an easy way out. And if I didn't have investors, I probably would have quit. But I felt obligated to those investors, and I just, it's a matter of digging deep and always kind of figuring out what is the next, what's the next trick that you can do to kind of move things on. And I think Adeo Resi has this great quote, which is, a company dies when the founder gives up. And to me, we had so many great times where we could just say, that's an insurmountable hurdle, we should just give up now. But I think the difference between success and failure is that you ultimately, you look past those perfectly legitimate excuses to fail and give up and just keep going. And so, the whole story that I went through the last 5 years has been frustrating ups and downs, but I'm more confident today than ever that we're on track to build something huge and game-changing. But it took a lot of kind of faith and hard work to get to this point.
You talk a little bit about fundraising, and I know you've shared with me, like in some of our conversations, was that really your investors invested in you. So it wasn't, you had an idea and you shared it with them, but ultimately they were like, we're investing in Sean, because whether it's this idea or another, they know you're gonna make it. They believe in you. So do you remember your first successful round of fundraising? Like, how did that happen? Was it like a casual meeting? Was it like, did you do?
So I'll tell you the opposite of that, because I tell you my most successful round was raising on a PowerPoint deck with no engineers on the team. But that was 9 years after, maybe even longer, probably about 9 years after the most frustrating fundraising that I ever had, which was when we were trying to raise money for Log Me In. We had 40 different VCs tell us no, and we were flying over from Eastern Europe, and we'd have the meeting scheduled. Every single VC in Silicon Valley that we could meet with said no. Every VC in New York said no. We finally found one in Boston that said yes, and it was great. When we went public 5 years later, almost all of them reached back out and said, gosh, were we stupid, and congratulations. And it was great to kind of rub their face in it a little bit.
Well, finding the right investors is also a challenge. Is there anything that you look for in an investor when you are entertaining, like working with someone?
So it's kind of like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, when I was raising money for the business, I had an opportunity to be pretty selective, and so then I didn't want to work with anybody who I didn't trust, who I didn't think I had the right chemistry with, and so I have really great investors from that perspective, and they've been super supportive every step of the way. But the truth is, most people aren't in that position where you can kind of pick your investors, but you can pick if you want investment, and so there's a lot of great companies that have bootstrapped, and so that's, I think, the trade-off is that when you take money from a lot of investors, you're committed to a partnership for a long time, and you have to aim big. Like if I bootstrapped Qualaroo as a standalone business, it'd be a pretty good business today, and it's super profitable, but it's just not venture return size right now, especially when it's kind of partially part of our focus. So spinning that out makes sense for us. But when I'm focusing on finding the right investors in like for most of you, when you're focused on finding the right investors, it's kind of like, you don't have that luxury of so much choice. And even I even knew the first time that I raised money that this will be the first time that I raise money on, or this will be the last time that I raise money on reputation. Like next time it's going to be on real numbers. This is just a business plan, and they're betting on my past success. But if I don't have success when I try to raise money the next time, I'm going to be in trouble. So yeah, if you have the luxury, go for like total trust and chemistry. But if you don't have that luxury, and I think you also have to decide, do you want hands-on investors? So investors that weren't right for me. I know the Sign Now team, for example, said they really liked that they had one of their investors that pushed them a lot, that challenged them all the time, that really held them to a standard that was almost higher than they held themselves to. I would hate that. I hold myself to a high enough standard. I put enough pressure on myself. I don't need somebody shouting on top of the pressure that I'm putting on myself. So I aim for pretty low, laid-back investors that would trust me. So yeah, part of it is really based on what your needs are.
You've worked with some successful companies, obviously. Was there any values that you adopted that you use in your own company, whether it's like leadership or culture in your own company that you're working with today that you've kind of adopted from them or you've learned?
Yeah, so probably the two best cultures of companies I worked with were Eventbrite and Dropbox. Eventbrite, just super family-oriented atmosphere, husband and wife founding team. They're just really like nurturing people that have built this great, friendly, supportive culture. And then Dropbox was so I've tried to borrow that. And then Dropbox was this culture of basically always doing the right thing for the customer. And I love that as well, and I've really tried to pick that up from them. So one example of Dropbox was when they introduced the referral program. I was doing a speaking thing in Scotland, and somebody came up to me and said, "I love Dropbox because I had always been a fan, and I told a bunch of people about Dropbox, and then this referral program came out." And I sent a note in, not expecting anything to come back, and just said, "I've told so many people, but I didn't get credit for it. This kind of sucks." And Dropbox immediately gave the person 100 free gigabytes of space. Not to say they do it today, but at that time they did, and they said, "Thank you for doing that." And the person said, "Since then I have told like 10 times as many people as I would have otherwise." And so, giving the benefit of the doubt to the customer and just doing the right thing, like I think that's a really important value that I picked up from Dropbox.
So you are an entrepreneur, you're an angel investor, you're a startup advisor, you're a CEO, a founder. What is your favorite hat to wear?
So I'm not an angel investor anymore.
Oh, I'm not an angel investor anymore.
Mostly just because that you can't do that and focus on a company at the same time. But I think the trade-off would be, it would either be founder, CEO, or the person who's responsible for focused driving growth. I love experimenting, looking at the data, being obsessive about what's working, how do I make it work better, that's super fun for me, and that one of the things that I don't like about being a founder CEO is that I just don't have time to do it, or at least to do it the right way now, and so I miss that, but then the other side is that when I left my last long-term full-time role, I hated it, and part of it was I had a head of sales who would send emails that were, F-bombs all through there, and red letters, capitalized letters saying where the F are my leads, and it was miserable, and I thought, this is when it's good. We had the company ready to do an IPO, and I hated it, and most of the time it doesn't go there, and so, is there any good path in working for someone else? And I didn't see it, and so for me it was, I basically, that's part of the reason why I also did the short-term stints with companies was get in and get out before it sucks. And then, but then ultimately when I said, okay, long term, if the company sucks long term when I'm the founder, then that's on me. And so so that's why I feel like I can be like more committed long term to a company, and I can try to eliminate some of the stuff I really didn't like, but you know, if I'm doing a good job or not, I don't know.
The last question I have for you tonight is there one quote or word of advice that you would give a startup or entrepreneur today?
Probably what I mentioned earlier, that you know a company fails when the founder gives up, and that, you know, that ultimately all of us constantly face great excuses for just failure, and every one of us could throw the towel in and feel good about it, to say like, oh, there was no way getting past that. Life's tough, who cares, you know, whatever. But somehow overcoming every one of those insurmountable like barriers and just moving on anyway, and like is how you succeed in a startup. And the few that never have those barriers are the very rare exceptions, and they probably had some barriers too. They just, you know, they've kind of cleaned up their story on what really happened.
Well, thank you so much for coming out tonight. Let's give Sean Ellis a big round of applause.